I want to talk to you in this topic about fear of childbirth. I spent 20 years of my life in about 30 different traditional cultures, not working with birth per se, and I brought my skills as a body worker into their communities. But you hear about birth, you understand what societies and cultures do. In 1970, when I first gave birth, Grantley Dick Reed was known. Now, in New Zealand, he was the first childbirth classes taught, whereas in the United States, it was Lamaze and Bradley. But we knew the book Childbirth Without Fear. It was published in 1942. We all know that pregnancy and childbirth are a normal part of life. We don't have any argument about that. We also know that women have always done it. We don't have any argument about that. The question is, should you be afraid of something that's a normal part of life that we've always done? And Grantley Dick Reed was saying, no, you shouldn't. Based on those two things, women shouldn't be afraid. And I want to explain to you what 30 different cultures think about that. This may come as a surprise to you, or it may just make common sense, because you have to take away all of modern conveniences along with modern healthcare. What do you think I learned in traditional communities? Do you think that people are afraid of pregnancy and childbirth or not? Which thought? That's a yes or no, isn't it? They're all afraid. And I just want that to sink into you. In fact, we are hardwired cellularly to be afraid when we become pregnant. I know that a lot of you are going to go, wait a minute, women have always done this. It's a normal part of life. So why are we hardwired to be anxious about childbirth and pregnancy? Every traditional culture knows that pregnancy and birth and the newborn period is fragile. Just because women have always done it and it's a normal part of life doesn't mean that it's always a healthy and safe part of life. In fact, birth, more so than pregnancy, sits on the edge between life and death because it is a compressed time frame. And the reason we're hardwired to be fearful or anxious is because it stimulates our ability to become more observant. And this is important. Fear is a normal way of facing the unknown. In fact, when we think of the sympathetic nervous system, fright, flight, and fight, and we think of the parasympathetic rest and digest, or calm, we know that if people are intensely in the sympathetic nervous system, that the parasympathetic nervous system tries to shut that down and will try to freeze out the sympathetic nervous system that will cause us or animals to go into a state of non-movement. At a severe level, it is a paralysis or shutting down, closing your eyes and curling up in a ball. But on the other scale of it, it is when we become observant and watchful. So observation is very important in our human experience. Fear is normal when facing the unknown. Fear is natural, and natural means that it happens or that it's spontaneous, whether it's good or bad, either in the experience or the outcome. Fear is a physiological process located in the primal hindbrain or the lizard brain of our body. If a rabbit is frightened, it freezes. That is their parasympathetic nervous system going into a heightened awareness so that they can either flee, fight, or continue to stay hidden, or whether they can relax and go about their business. Pregnancy occurs over a longer time frame than birth does. So therefore, our anxiety and fears in pregnancy, thinking about birth, are on a different scale. And the anxieties in birth are on a different scale because we don't know moment to moment what is going to really happen. And we know that pregnancy and birth, as they unfold, are going to unfold with multiple elements to it. And all of them pretty much take place within some type of healthcare system, whether it's traditional, modern, or natural wellness, and a combination of all of those. And fear is often part of any individual's experience, whether it's expressed or not, or even acknowledged. Fear is an emotion. It's a primal reaction. It's shared across species. It is normal natural, and physiological. It can be hard to recognize, and it can be extreme, or it can be lingering for a long period of time. So what happens when we suppress fear? First of all, it's still there. We can try to mentally express it, but it's a primal emotion. And the thing about emotions is that they have no language. Language, it's not in our lizard brain. We feel it, and it's hard to explain. Often, when fear paralyzes us, it prevents instinctive or fast reactions. Sometimes we fight when we're afraid. So what do we do with this? That's the question. Grantley Dick Reed was saying, stop being afraid. Does fear stop labor from going on? No, not particularly. I've worked with women who've been absolutely terrified of birth. Terrified, the whole time. Quick labors, easy, baby gets out. After the birth, they'll just go, I was terrified the whole time. That's okay. They use their skills even though they were afraid. And it is complex about women being afraid in birth. Does it cause internal tension? Sometimes internal tension doesn't matter. If your baby, relative to the space inside, has no obstruction, the baby's just going to open up your body. If your baby is fairly big relative to your structure or your conscious, subconscious, structural, or stretching tension, then yes, if you tense up because of fear, then yes, of course, that can impede your birth. But birth can be impeded whether you're afraid or not because of those qualities. But I want to talk to you about our being hardwired to be fearful and anxious in pregnancy and childbirth. And I want you to understand that it's really a gift. Many, many years ago, and you may have read this book, The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker, it's not about pregnancy and childbirth. It's really about using fear, the instinct of fear, to become observant to the potential of the future. And in traditional communities, they all use fear as observation. They just stop and they watch and they wait until they know what to do. Traditional communities know how vulnerable pregnancy, birth, and the newborn period are. They pay very close attention. Let's talk about problems, physical problems around pregnancy and birth. In modern cultures, the way that that's addressed is through the assessments, monitoring procedures. In traditional cultures, it's about the do's and don'ts in pregnancy. The natural birth movement about safeguarding the birth, it's really about research and choice now, trusting the process and trying to ignore or suppress or deny the fear. So when we dampen and suppress and deny our fears at any time in our life, it suppresses our ability to be observant and even often suppresses our instinct. Women will often beat themselves up when they come and say, I'm afraid of birth, because they've read or been told, don't be afraid of it. But not being afraid of birth, suppressing what is hardwired in us, has a huge negative impact in both birth and after birth. Women can be anxious even if they wanted to get pregnant. Everybody cares about their baby. Be anxious about your baby. We get told by the natural birth movement not to be afraid of birth, and we get told by the medical profession to be concerned. And this produces a conflict. In traditional communities, they don't talk about fear. They just become more observant. Around birth, it's always unknown and unknowable until it's over. And it is natural and feel anxious and even fearful. You often feel it when women are just beginning to start labor. Their adrenaline's up, everything's up, so they begin to get anxious about what it's going to be like. That anxiety or fear doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be targeted to I'm afraid I'm going to die or I'm afraid my baby's going to die. It can be just about newness or unfamiliarity or feeling that you just don't have skills to meet the task or changes. So how does the medical profession deal with it? It's the assessments, monitoring procedures. The natural birth movement, since the 80s, became leave women alone and just trust it. In traditional communities, it's deal with what's in front of you and just keep going. So when you feel fear, This is what you need to do. Acknowledge it. Be observant inside and out. And then use a bottom line. Because if you grow the gift of fear when you're pregnant, then this will have a huge spin-off when you have a newborn baby. Newborns can't talk to you. They can't tell you what's the matter. All you do is to see and hear them. When we have suppressed fear, what we see, particularly in first-time moms, when the baby wakes up and moves, you hear the mother or father say, "What's the matter with it?" They're anxious about what this means. Part of it is because they lack skills to understand the cues that all babies give us. There are very specific cues that you learn to read, and if you're taught those skills, it makes it easier for you to understand what the baby wants or needs. But if you lack those skills, and if you lack the gift of fear, then everything the baby does, particularly that first baby, you're frightened that something may be the matter. You don't know what to do. If you ever watch the movie Parenthood with Steve Martin, there's a wonderful scene in there when they're in front of the principal's office and they're talking about their oldest child and how that first child, you're so frightened, but by the third time you let them juggle knives. And for all of us that have had more than one child, we know that. We developed that gift of fear. We become more observant. We read the cues and the messages better. We are more skilled as parents, and so we're more relaxed. But there's always a bottom line, and this is what you need to know. If fear comes up any time in your life, you want to first ask yourself this question. Do I feel that I, or let's say the baby, are going to be dead or severely injured in the next 5 minutes? And if you feel that's true, get help or do something. And if it's not 5 minutes, extend it out. You can extend it out for an hour, a few hours, up to 12 hours. If it goes past 12 hours, you're into observation to see whether it's going to get worse or it's going to subside. When you develop this gift of fear, it makes a huge difference in your life, period. Use the gift of fear. The bottom line, dead or severely injured within 5 minutes or a short period of time, do something or get help. If it's a longer period of time, don't shut the fear down. Just stay observant. And at some point it will either dissipate or you need to act or get help. Don't suppress fear. Use it as a gift. The gift of fear is one of the greatest skills that we have. The natural birth movement, just trust birth, is really like an ostrich. I can't tell you how many videos that I've watched of women birthing naturally where they haven't seen that a problem's coming up. That problem doesn't necessarily mean the death of themselves or their baby. They just don't see it. The medical profession is often overreactive, as we all know. The traditional cultures, they built the gift. And when they felt they needed to act, they acted with skills.